Okay, theory number two. I, I I don't want to disagree with the Buddha. What I'm trying to tell you is I think that there's going to be unity between the first one I just presented and the second one, which actually makes more sense to me. Ugh, frustrating. It's frustrating, trust me. But you just got to sit here and think. Just think about it. This is what this video is about. This is about get you thinking in the right way. So the second one requires a completely different science, okay? Because in this second theory, time does exist, but it doesn't exist in the third dimension, which we are in. It exists in the fourth dimension. So just as you have the x-axis, the y-axis, the height axis, that's 3 dimensions. In the fourth dimension, you also have the axis of time. So you have all the 3 dimensions, the x, the y, and the height, which actually they call it z, but moving along back and forth between a progression of time. And when you're in the fourth dimension, you can see that progression and you can potentially manipulate it. So if you are a fourth dimensional being, you might be able to manipulate time. Okay, so that's the other theory. There is a lot more to it than that. And I want to talk about that one more because it's super interesting. So in this theory, we have the space-time reality in which we are in. That's the conscious world. That's the material world. Okay, let's call that the material world. Space-time dimension. We move through space freely, but we have no freedom when it comes to how we move through time. Time is just we're being pulled through time, and we can't control it. Okay? So the theory which comes from this is the science which is going to come from this. And if we can advance this and actually find out if this is true or not, this will be how we learn to manipulate time back and forth. So we are a cluster of, we're a cluster of protons. We're moving at light speed, basically. So, fuck, this is complicated. The theory of, Einstein's theory, the E equals mc squared is energy equals matter at the speed of light. But where the problem comes in, squared. But where the problem comes in is that scientists have, I believe, desperately, drastically mistaken that they're in their model. The faster you get, the speed of time, actually you slow down the aging process. And that's true, they can measure that. Even when you're traveling in a rocket, which is nowhere near light speed, you age less rapidly than you do here on Earth. Okay, but if you were going at the speed of light, you could probably not age at all. Okay, so you are manipulating time. But what happens when you approach or try to surpass time in their model, which I believe is flawed? Your mass exponentially starts to increase so that you cannot actually cross the speed of light, because every time you try to, your mass increases, which slows you down so that it cannot be crossed, because your mass just keeps increasing. And the more mass you have, the slightly slower you move, and then blah, blah, blah. That's the theory. I think that's wrong. I think you definitely can't. I mean, because how does that make sense? Like, a proton of light is moving at the speed of light, and it's so small you can't even see it. You can barely even measure it. It's so small. So that theory to me just on its face cannot be true. But if you were to surpass the speed of light, and like I said, our bodies are moving at the speed of light, a cluster of proton cells just moving at the speed of light. If you were to exert, boom, and even through a force, there is an exertion there. So in this region that just got hit with an impact, I added force to something that is already traveling near the speed of light. So you could hypothetically, boom, knock that for instantaneously or momentarily beyond the speed of light. So what's going to happen is my mass decreases. That's what actually happens when you measure it. And the measure of this is a simple test. Take a basketball, and real scientists, not me, have done this experiment with really sophisticated measuring tools, really sophisticated. So they can pick up on the most minute changes in mass. Bounce the ball, At the moment of impact, the mass doesn't increase like the E equals mc squared theory and the minds kind of say. It actually slightly decreases. So what is, but then it returns to its normal mass. What happened? Where did it go? It went somewhere. It didn't. You can't be created or destroyed. This is where the theory comes in. I think it moved from the space-time dimension to the time-space dimension, which you could consider the non-corporeal world, the world in which the other entities, spirits, live. They are in the time-space dimension, I believe. We, physical beings, are in the space-time dimension. So if I was to accelerate all the protons of my body beyond the speed of light, I could theoretically switch into the space-time dimension, and now I'm traveling beyond the speed of light. And in the time-space dimension is what I meant to say. You move around that realm through time freely, the way we move through space freely. There in the time-space, you move around time-space freely. And then when you decelerate back below the speed of time, you flip back over into the space-time, and then you can manipulate space freely. So what happens? What happens when you're over there and you're moving through time freely, but space, it seems like you're moving through space in a linear fashion, in which here seems like time, there it seems like you're moving through space in that way. I don't know. That's something that takes a lot of contemplating. Okay, and there's guys out there that are thinking about this stuff. There's guys out there that are actually studying this stuff. There's guys out there that are actually putting this study into practice, especially in Russia. I don't know why they're studying it so much more in Russia. We're not paying attention to it at all here. In Russia, they take this stuff very seriously. The scientists there, they really are looking into this stuff, and I think they're succeeding. And we're going to talk about that in another video, because that's where we learn about all the potential advancements that come from that. So, for an example, I'll just give you a quick example before we do that. They say, the pyramids, how are those made? Those blocks are so large, some of them being like 100 tons, 1,000 tons, like so big. I've seen the picture where they have one of those blocks that makes up the pyramid on the back of a semi-truck, and it was so heavy that it actually buckled the trailer of the semi and broke the semi. That's how big they are. We can't even design cranes that can lift some of these fucking blocks. They're so massive, so heavy. So how did a bunch of slaves lift them? They didn't. Okay, that's the answer. They did not. They had some sort of technology. The technology they probably had, the one that makes the most sense, I don't know it's far-fetched, is they probably were able to accelerate the protons in those blocks beyond the speed of light, so as to push a large portion of those protons, a large portion of those atoms, into the time-space dimension. So there is just like a ghost of that object, which is now significantly lighter, maybe 99% lighter. And then you can move them. You can move them with ease. And then they'll eventually come back. Those protons will naturally kind of be brought back into the physical world, and then now it's in place. I think that's how it was done. I think they had that technology. And to study that, of how that could be possible, you're going to have to read a lot of books. Okay, Graham Hancock's a great place to start. Fingerprints of the God, Magicians of the God. He explains how these civilizations are really ancient. Okay, way older than scholars are currently telling us they are. They're not 5,000, they're not 7,000 years old. Graham Hancock sets out the possibilities for them to be 12,000 years old or much older than that, 20,000 years even. So read those books. He uses the science of geology to disprove pretty much everything the Egyptologists, the historians are saying, the anthropologists, and actually he pisses everybody off, because they're like, fuck you, we've been working on this theory like our whole lives. If you tell me that this is wrong, that means everything I've done, and now I'm a 60-year-old man, has been wrong. And of course, they don't want to accept that, and that's only human. But I think he's right. So, should we talk about anything else there? No. Next week, we will talk about gravity, and we'll talk about other things. Okay. Let's leave it off there. So, we have the two theories. There is no time, there's only now. Everything's changing. It's a Nietzsche. It's an illusion. Or there is time, but we have to access the different dimension or learn to flip over into the space-time dimension. And I think that there is a way to bring those two theories together, because definitely the Buddha could not have been wrong. I just don't think he could have been. He was such a master, so enlightened, so brilliant, that obviously what he was observing scientifically in his mind, because he is a scientist too, was correct. So there is a possibility that both theories are correct, but how to bring them together is beyond me. I'm just a thinker. And obviously they're going to take two completely different sciences. So the first theory, whether it is in Nietzsche, how to change. Like, say I want to be a younger person. I don't want to be an 80-year-old man. I want to be in a 30-year-old body when I'm 80 years old. Then the science involved there isn't going to be a manipulation of time. It's going to be a regeneration of the body, because our bodies are degenerating. So we have to learn to regenerate the body. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to energize the cells. Get the cells healthy. Because our cells are decaying. That's why we're aging. Okay? So through different things, you can re-energize the cells. You can re-energize the DNA. You can bring light, bring protons, bring energy, bring them all back into the DNA, bring them all back into the cells, bring them all back into the atoms, because they actually are losing energy. And that's why I got so into microcurrent. That's why I got so into electric therapy. That's why I got so into PEMF, pulse electromagnetic field, because these are the only sciences that I know of that actually re-energize the cells. Okay, so you can regenerate them. And right now we're still in a primitive form of that technology, but I think that's a huge potential for advancement in the future. I think that's going to be how we live a long time, by learning to master the regeneration of the cells and the DNA.